Good afternoon. My name is Donna Feazell, and I'm your host of The Edge on IC Radio, your source for news and entertainment. You can also find us on television, channel 182 on Charter Communications, and Abundance Television found on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. Don't forget the podcast, netnewsnetwork.net. If you'd like to send an email, please send that to Donna at donnasedge.com. That's Donna at donnasedge.com. So we're all hearing about President Trump, the grand jury, and I found an article I thought was pretty interesting. It's pnj.com, that's Pensacola News Journal.com. Ever wondered why indictments are filed by a grand jury? If so, this is what grand juries do. So let's go ahead and talk just a little bit about this. I want to actually dedicate 30 minutes show to this information right here. So the historic criminal charges brought against former President Donald Trump, involving dozens of counts of allegedly, make sure you put that word in there, violating 8 federal statutes related to the handling of classified documents after he left the White House, has put the federal legal system into the spotlight. As many wonder what happens next. We're all wondering. Trump received an indictment over the charges from a grand jury on Thursday of last week, with his arraignment set in federal court in Miami on Tuesday, which will be tomorrow at 2 p.m., and that is CDT time. Okay, so the date on that is going to be on the 13th, Flag Day of all days. So Trump received the indictment, and there's a 44-page indictment. It was unsealed on Friday, and details of the former president's alleged crimes. Now, Trump was charged with suggesting his lawyer falsely tell the FBI and grand jury that he didn't have classified documents, and directing his aide, Walt Nauta, to move boxes of documents to hide them from the lawyer, the FBI, and the grand jury, according to USA Today. Okay, now charges against Trump. This is a secret. Donald Trump indictment details charges against a former president. So before that indictment could be filed, prosecutors presented an outline of their case that included evidence and witness testimony to a federal grand jury in Miami. Now, once this case has been heard, the grand jury votes in secret to file the indictment. But this has been my question. What is a grand jury, and how do they pick the grand jury? Now, a grand jury is an impartial group. I don't know how you could find an impartial group, but anyway, of 23 citizens who are tasked with determining whether or not there's probable cause to believe that someone has committed a federal offense within the venue of the district court. This is according to the Department of Justice, the DOJ. The jury will meet once a week during its 12-month term. Now, attendance is critical for grand juries, which have a 16-member quorum if an emergency prevents a grand juror's attendance. A grand jury must stop if a grand jury does not have a quorum. Now, once a case has been presented to the grand jury, they will vote in secret to determine whether they will file an indictment or return a no bill, which simply means the grand jury concluded there's not enough evidence of guilt to support a criminal charge. Now, a jury needs 12 or more votes to indict a defendant. Got to have 12 votes to indict. Okay, so this has been my question. So how is a grand jury selected? Again, this is in pnj.com. That's Pensacola News Journal.com. Federal law dictates that grand juries are selected from a fair pool of citizens randomly drawn from a list of registered voters, according to the Handbook of Federal Grand Jurors. Now, similar to jury selection for a trial jury, and we're going to get down to what is the difference between a jury selection for an indictment and then a trial jury. The remaining candidates not exempt or excused will appear before the court, where the presiding judge will consider any further requests to be excused. A selection of 23 qualified citizens will then become members of the grand jury. Now, what happens after the indictment? What happens now that Trump is indicted, his arraignment? So here's what to know according to this article, pnj.com. indictments.com. How is a grand jury different from a trial jury? Okay, because we've all watched television, we've seen news, hoping it's the right information out there. But as described above, a grand jury's only duty is to determine whether there is probable cause to believe the accused has committed a crime and should be put on trial. Now, this group of 23 impartial citizens, here's an outline of the argument against the accused, including evidence and witness testimony. They will then vote in secret to determine whether an indictment is filed against the defendant or to return a no bill. So my question about this whole thing is, okay, so you got to have 23 people, impartial citizens, hear the outline. Okay, we're not in the world we were in when my grandparents were alive, okay, because back in the day, one set of my grandparents were Democrats and the others were Republicans. Back then, you could talk to people in most cases in a civil tone. I remember both my granddads getting together and I would sit and listen to them when they were talking on the porch. And so my granddad Shears would say, Mr. Bearden, what are your thoughts on your Republican? So what are your thoughts on what's going on in the world right now? So my granddad Bearden would say, well, Mr. Shears, I respect your opinion. This is my opinion on, I mean, they would actually talk civil. But my point is, are we in a civil world anymore? Because, I mean, it's like there's no one, it seems, I can't find anybody who's in the middle. People are on one side of the spectrum or they're on the other side of the spectrum. And so this is why I questioned the election, the last presidential election, and I'm basing it on the state of North Carolina. So North Carolina elected a governor, supposedly, and this guy is very liberal, and I mean, he's really into the liberal agenda. However, the lieutenant governor is a black man, very much a conservative. So in the state that this country is in right now, where people will more likely vote a straight ticket, you see where I'm coming at? Okay, so in the state of North Carolina, so you have a governor who is completely on the bias. He's there's no doubt about it, he's liberal. But then on the same token, a very conservative person is elected as lieutenant governor. So that was why I questioned it, because I know the state of the world we're in right now, people are either one way or they're the other. They're not in the middle anymore. So how can you find 23 impartial citizens? I mean, you're going to have to really dig under some rocks. People who have never heard of Trump, because people, and that's another thing with Trump. People either love him or they hate him. I'm not seeing anybody in the middle anywhere that says, I'm okay. I'm not seeing that. You either hate him or you love him. I mean, that's just, that's the logical, that's what you call logic in this world that we're in right now in the year 2023. Okay, so grand jury proceedings are secret and not open to the public, and documentation regarding an indictment is sealed so that only the people present in the room have knowledge of the case. So a trial jury, also known as the petit jury, and that's P-E-T-I-T jury, is a group of 12 impartial citizens who determine whether the defendant committed the crime is charged. And that's a trial jury, okay? Now, these trials are typically public aside from jury deliberations, and they issue a verdict rather than a true bill, indictment, or a no bill. Unlike grand juries where defendants and attorneys don't have the right to appear before it, defendants have the right to appear, testify, and call witnesses on their behalf. Now, what happens if you're chosen to be on the grand jury? So if you go through the grand jury selection process and become a qualified member of the grand jury, then you will be one of the 23 members obligated to meet once a week for a certain period, typically 12 months, for grand juries designated. And that's kind of like they're in this investigatory, that they're seeking information. And 6 months for grand juries designated. Here's my deal about that. If they watch any television whatsoever, or they're on social media, they do Facebook or anything like that, is that not going to have a little bit of bias? Is that not going to make you go either one way or the other? I would think that you need to get them away from communications, they need to be away from TV, they need to be away from their laptops. Do not let them have a cell phone. That would be my guess. Okay, so here's a condensed outline of the process outlined in the Handbook for Federal Grand Jurors: organization, oath, and officers. Now, the court will select one person to be the foreperson or presiding officer of the grand jury and a deputy foreperson to serve in the foreperson's absence. The grand jury then takes an oath binding them to their diligence and how they're going to be objective throughout this entire process. Now, the charge of the grand jury is when the presiding judge goes over its obligations and how to perform them. Once the grand jury is charged, it will begin hearing the case. Now, this is the question that a lot of us has asked, and that question is why Trump was indicted in Florida. Will Trump's Florida indictment give him a home turf advantage? Like football, when let's say Alabama and Auburn are playing. They're two big rivals right there. So if the game is going to be playing in Auburn, then that's going to give Auburn the hometown advantage, don't you think? That's why I was surprised, because I think it'll give him the hometown advantage. So that's why I was really surprised this whole thing is being done in Florida. And why was it filed in Miami? Okay, I mean, that was a question, So a quorum must be met. To meet the quorum, 16 of the 23 jurors must be present. Now, if the grand jury has less than 16 members, then it must stop. Let's go ahead and go into a commercial break. We're going to be right back in just a few minutes because a lot of us have the same questions. We'll be right back.
At Lamone's Mexican Restaurant, located in Henniger, Alabama, and voted Best Mexican Restaurant of DeKalb County, Alabama 2020, we're here to serve you with authentic Mexican cuisine. Order easily online by going to lamonsmex.com or call 256-657-3999 to place your order. We're open Sunday through Thursday, 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. and Friday and Saturday, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Whether you're celebrating a cozy date night for two or a celebration for a crowd, at Lamone's you'll love our atmosphere and friendly servers. Thank you for dining with Lamone's Mexican Restaurant. Let Rhonda at Rhonda's Elite Tax LLC take the burden off you for all your tax needs. I know because Rhonda has been taking care of my business since 2013. I feel Rhonda works for me because she knows the direct questions to ask to better benefit my unique business in order for me to get back the biggest refund possible. Rhonda is an ongoing student, and she knows tax laws are in a constant change every year. Call 256-281-9903 for an appointment to take the dread out of getting your taxes done. Rhonda is located at 11968 U.S. Highway 431 in Boaz. Again, that number is 256-281-9903. And let Rhonda's Elite Tax LLC champion your personal and business taxes. Jeff McCurdy of the McCurdy Law Firm has been a public service of this area for over 10 years. McCurdy, a member of the Henniger City Council, serves as prosecutor for the town of Sylvania and was named public defender for the city of Rainsville. The McCurdy Law Firm is located at 17326 Alabama Highway 75 in Henniger to better represent his Jackson and DeKalb County clients. If you need to be represented by a true public servant with proven success, call Jeff at 256-996-8701 or send a private email to mccurdylawfirm@gmail.com. No representation is made that the legal services performed is greater than the legal services performed by other lawyers. At Liberty Bank, we're all about community, whether it's to help with a charity fundraiser or help families in need. Toys at Christmas or a local football team, we're here for you. You see, we realize the importance of family. Sometimes it's to build a new home or necessary home repairs. We're here for you. If you like the feel of a small town bank with all the conveniences of a big city bank, we're here to serve you. You will find us at any of our convenient locations in DeKalb, Marshall, Etowah, and Blount counties in North Alabama. You can call and speak with any of our friendly staff at 256-659-2175 or check us out on the web at libertybankal.com. And thank you for your support of our community. Member FDIC Equal Housing Lender.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0.
The best sleep just got even better. Whether you have a MyPillow or not, you need to get the brand new MyPillow 2.0. Call or go to mypillow.com now. Use your promo code, and for a limited time when you buy one, you'll get a second one absolutely free.
We are back. My name is Donna, and I am your host of The Edge on IC Radio, your source for news and entertainment. You can also find us on television, channel 182 on Charter Communications and Abundant Television, which is found on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. Thank you so much for watching. We're talking about what is an indictment. How is it different from federal? I mean, how is all of this happening? How do you find the jurors? You know, why do only so many people have to show up? That kind of thing. I found this information. It's on Pensacola News Journal, pnj.com. pnj.com. Makes me think of peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But anyway, I must be hungry. Okay. All right. So we talked about why Trump was indicted in Florida. Will Trump's Florida indictment give him a home turf advantage? And why was it filed in Miami? The quorum must be met. To meet the quorum, 16 of the 23 jurors must be present. Now, if the grand jury has less than 16 members, then it must stop. Okay, let's go on ahead and look. I'm really interested in this and why the historic criminal charges against Trump. Why a grand juror, and there's attendance is really important. We all know of that. But and how they're selected, and how's it different from a trial juror? We talked about that. What happens if you're chosen to be on the grand juror? Okay, so if you go through the grand jury application process and become a qualified member of the grand jury, then you'll be one of the 23 members obligated to meet once a week for a certain period, typically 12 months for a grand jury is designated, and 6 months for grand jury is designated accusatory. So here is the outline. Okay, so we'll talk about this just for a second. Now, this is for the grand jurors. Organization, oath, and officers. We kind of touched on this just a few minutes ago, but let's dig into it just a little deeper. So the court will select one person to be the foreperson, or the presiding officer of the grand jury, and a deputy foreperson to serve in the foreperson's absence. Now, the grand jury then takes an oath binding them to their diligence and objectivity throughout the process. Now, the charge of the grand jury is when the presiding judge goes over its obligations and how to perform them. Now, once the grand jury is charged, it will begin hearing the case. Okay, evidence is brought before the grand jury. Here we go. Now, the brunt of the grand juror's time will be spent hearing witness testimony and examining evidence to determine whether an indictment should be filed. Government attorneys are present throughout the process to present the evidence of allegations. The grand jury is also allowed to call additional witnesses. Now, witnesses are called to testify. Okay, witnesses will be called to testify before the grand jury. Now, the witnesses will be sworn in by the foreperson and then questioned first by the government attorney, then by the foreperson of the grand jury. Other members of the grand jury are allowed to question the witness afterward. Attorneys are not permitted to be present, but witnesses maintain the right to consult with legal counsel and may asked to leave the room to talk with their attorney. Witnesses may also invoke their Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination to not answer questions. Now, the person being investigated can request to appear before the grand jury. People being investigated for crimes by a grand jury do not have the right to be present during the process, but they can send a request to appear before the grand jury. Now, the grand jury meets to deliberate. Finally, the grand jury will meet to deliberate after all the evidence in the case has been presented. At this point, everyone except for the grand jury must leave the room as it deliberates whether or not to file an indictment. Now, an indictment requires 12 votes from the grand jury. Okay, so this is where I've been somewhat confused. So is this giving folks two chances to indict Trump? I mean, that has been my question about this whole thing. Okay, and let's dig just a little bit deeper into this. The whole thing, I mean, we've not been through any of this before, so let's kind of dig in just a little bit deeper, because it's really confusing. You would think where it happened, then that's where the indictment actually happened. That's where the whole place would be held. Okay, so we're talking about the indictment. Former President Donald Trump was indicted by a federal grand jury on Thursday related to charges involving classified documents that were seized from his Florida estate, Mar-a-Lago, last year. This indictment marks the second time the ex-president has been indicted after criminal charges were filed against him in March surrounding hush money payment to adult films, alleged, by the way, adult film actress Stormy Daniels during his 2016 presidential campaign. Now, the trial for that case is set in New York, March 25th, 2024. Trump's arraignment for the latest charges are set for June the 12th. So here's what happens next. Now, what does an indictment mean? Because this is really confusing. So let me tell you something that happened. Okay, I have a family member that is pretty much well out to destroy. And I mean, that's what she's all about. So I had a former employer who called another employer and said I was being indicted, said that I was being indicted. And of course, it freaked him out. And, you know, and I wasn't actually being indicted. It was something he made up. Well, I freaked out because I've never been in trouble before. I mean, I've led a pretty, I'm not perfect, but I've led a pretty simple life. You know, I don't mess around with people. Even when this family member will lie and say things against me, I just don't go after it. I just let it go. I don't see the point in arguing with simpletons. I don't see the point in it because it just doesn't make sense. So I found out this relative of mine actually got this whole thing started. Okay. So I called one of my friends who is in the law world, and he actually held an office at that time, and I said, I am freaking out. I have been indicted. Well, he thought I was joking. And so he said, Donna, he said, come on. And he said, I'm real busy right now. We'll talk later. And he was just laughing and hung up. Well, I called him right back. I said, I am not joking. I've been indicted. And he said, you've not been indicted. I would know you were being indicted. And I said, but this person, this former employer, my relative, got together, and he said, no, they're just trying to scare you. Because they know you've probably, you know, you've led a boring life, let's admit it. And it says, so they're just trying to scare you. I would know if you'd been indicted. And I was still freaking out because I'm thinking, well, we're friends, and he doesn't want me to worry, so he's saying that. So he said, if it'll make you feel better, he said, I will call all the law agencies, I'll call the sheriff's department, I'll call Trooper, I'll call everybody, and we'll see if there's anything out there I just missed. So he gets back in contact with me, and he said, Donna, nothing is happening. He said, this is just a family member, and your former employer is probably afraid you're going to sue him because you have asthma based on working there. It was a bad working environment. He said, they're just after you. They're trying to scare you into submission. And I said, but I have nothing to be, I'm not even talking about these people. So I don't understand why they're doing it. He said, they're just trying to head you off the path. They're trying to scare you. So this is why I know a little bit about it, not because I was indicted, but because someone wanted to get the rumor out that I had been indicted. Never been indicted before in my entire life. Somebody just wanted to get the rumor out. So an indictment is a formal charging document that's used when it's believed a person committed a crime. It includes the charges against a person should be filed before a case can move forward to the court. David Weinstein, a former federal and state prosecutor, previously told USA Today, an indictment means a grand jury decided that there's more likely than not enough evidence based on testimony to move forward when charging a person. Weinstein said in a federal court, all cases proceed via indictment. So what charges are Trump facing? His lawyer outlines an Espionage Act, obstruction, conspiracy, which is what I think. So what's the difference between being charged or indicted? Okay, so the terms indicted and charged are often used interchangeably to describe a formal accusation of a crime against a person, but each can have a slightly different meaning depending on the legal system and its jurisdiction. So the Department of Justice describes an indictment as a formal notice filed by a grand jury against a person who is believed to have committed a crime. That doesn't mean they have. The indictment contains basic information about the charges against the person. So indictments are primarily used for felonies. A charge isn't quite as specific and simply describes the law believed to have been broken by the defendant. So what is the indictment process? Okay, so prosecutors may choose to present a case to a grand jury based on information regarding a crime presented to them by investigators. Now, for potential felony charges, prosecutors will present evidence to the grand jury, which is an impartial group of citizens along with the outline of the case. We talked about that before. Witnesses may be called to testify during this process. Now, once the grand jury hears the evidence, they will vote in secret, again, we're mentioning that, on whether they believe the evidence presented to them is strong enough to charge the individual. If they decide not to charge a person, then no indictment is filed. All proceedings and statements presented are sealed, which means only the people present during the process know the evidence presented to the grand jury. The DOJ states that the grand jurors are a constitutional requirement for some crimes so that the citizens involved don't know the defendant and can therefore make an unbiased decision based solely on the evidence presented to them. I don't know who doesn't know who Donald J. Trump is. Everybody does. So what happens after the indictment? Defendants have the right to legal representation and can choose to hire a lawyer or be represented by a public defender. The next step in the legal process is the arraignment and the initial hearing. So there you go. We still don't know yet. All of this other stuff has to happen first, okay? Don't know if it's going to be a long, drawn-out ordeal. I don't know how you can find someone who doesn't know who Donald J. Trump is. Somebody, even people who have been living out in the woods know who Donald J. Trump is. Okay, thank you so much for watching. That's kind of it's kind of a Reader's Digest version on what to expect at this point. I'll come up with another show and about what happens after this whole thing is done, whether he's indicted or not, okay? So anyway, thank you so much for watching. My name is Donna, and I am your host of The Edge on IC Radio, your source for news and entertainment. You can find us on television, channel 182, on Charter Communications and Abundant Television, which is found on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. Don't forget the podcast, netnewsnetwork.net. You take care.